Mad Max 2 The Road Warrior returns us to the wasteland. A reluctant hero gets caught up in a battle between savage raiders and a community fighting for survival. Rev your engines for one of the most influential films in the post-apocalyptic subgenre. Welcome everyone to the Atomic Cinema Experiment. I am Peter, and joining me here in the wasteland is David.
I come in peace.
That's the wrong genre, David. Come on now. This is a science fiction movie podcast. We'll get to spoilers later, but we'll start spoiler free as we always do. We're here today to talk about The Road Warrior Mad Max 2, and we'll get into all that in a bit. I'll just let you know that you can support the show by going to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV, and you can get some bonus content, some bonus monthly shows. I'll tell you more about them at the end. And if you enjoy the show, please do hit the like button. It helps us out a lot. More people will find us, so hit the buttons. But this is a sci-fi movie podcast, and we are building up sort of gradually, because in the summer, we're getting Furiosa. We're getting the 5th movie in the Mad Max series, although Mad Max himself, as far as we know, will not be appearing in the movie. It wouldn't surprise me if there's a cameo, but I'm not expecting one.
I was gonna say we'll see about that, because I feel like Tom Hardy would be itching to return to a role that got him so much acclaim.
Possibly, although apparently they all had a nightmare making that movie. It was a long, arduous shoot where they got very upset at each other. So
all the more reason why he would only want to show up for like one day for a quick little cameo.
Very true, very true. So yeah, we did the first Mad Max a few episodes ago, and we're here today for the second film, which, because the first Mad Max wasn't necessarily a big thing internationally, they kind of like retitled it to just The Road Warrior when it first released, I believe, in the US, maybe other locations too. But it is Mad Max 2 The Road Warrior, or sometimes it's flipped the other way around. Although, funnily enough, on iTunes, where I've got all the movies purchased, right, when I go to them, first one says Mad Max, right? The second one just says Mad Max, The Road Warrior, and I've never seen it written that way anywhere else. It's always Mad Max 2. But what's really weird about it is that Fury Road says Mad Max 4 Fury Road, and I've never seen that anywhere else either.
Yeah, someone at iTunes is just taking the piss on that one.
I don't understand. It's just wrong. But yes, I had seen this once before a long time ago. I remembered enjoying it, but it'd been quite a while. I was curious to get into it now, especially with the first one fresh in my head. This was your first time, I believe, David?
Yes, it was. I do think that I have seen several like clips from this one, because a lot of stuff was seeming familiar, but it's been at least a decade since I've seen those clips. So
sure,
the entire movie, start to end, definitely a first time through.
Yeah, this one is more of what you think of when you think of Mad Max. It is absolutely the post-apocalyptic wasteland. The start of the movie actually does try to kind of contextualize where the first movie took place in this sort of apocalypse timeline, which we'll get to in spoilers.
Yeah, suffice to say, that opening like 2 minutes is the biggest retcon I've ever heard in my life.
Well, it doesn't really retcon anything. It just adds a lot more stuff that we didn't see in the first movie.
True. There's a point in there where they start showing clips of the first movie, and I'm like, boy, you sure are really picky and choosy about what you're showing here and leaving behind other places.
But hey, this is the movie where gasoline is the most cherished, probably other than food, I imagine, is the most cherished.
Oh no, it's far ahead of that.
It's the most cherished resource in the wasteland. And the premise of the film is quite simple. It's a very simple movie. It's like 95 minutes. It's about a camp, a settlement, if you will, of relatively good characters who have access to a big tanker of gasoline. They've got like an oil pump, and they've been retrieving it. And there is a group of raiders, and this is your Mad Max villains, you know, with the various hockey gear and spikes and a bit S&M in places. There's a hockey mask. There's a wild assortment of people. They want to get in there and take all this fuel. And that's what the movie's about. And of course, Mad Max himself gets involved early on, and that's what the movie's about. It's about him getting involved and not really wanting to help them. But I don't think it's really spoiling much to say that eventually he will help them in some way.
I mean, it goes a lot to say that a big inspiration for this movie is the Western, and especially with that reluctant hero who's just brought in and doesn't want to get involved, but of course he has a heart of gold, and it always ends up happening that way.
Yeah, I suppose in a way you could look at it as the Western is the wasteland before modern civilization, and the wasteland of the post-apocalypse is the wasteland after civilization. But
Yeah.
fundamentally, the idea of these small towns with, only maybe a few dozen people and limited resources, I mean, there is a lot of overlap in some ways.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Western is really based off the idea of, okay, you don't have this larger infrastructure. You don't have like the military who's going to roll in, or you don't have this idea of, an police state or anything like that. It's just you have people who are against the law and a small group who is for the law, and they're essentially equal in terms of standard Westerns of like size and gunpowder and stuff like that. And post-apocalypse, when it comes to Mad Max, it's the same sort of thing. It's all about how much horsepower you got being the difference here.
Yeah, the one key difference I would say, other than obviously some of just the setting of being after civilization and having remnants of that still being around, is just the idea that a lot of the bad people, of which there seems to be more of than anything else, tend to be the people who were crazy enough to have survived the apocalypse.
Yeah.
And the people remember what civilization was, which definitely gives it a different vibe to the Western, where they don't know what that's like yet, because they're building up to that future. So, yeah, that's just a larger, broader scope of like thinking about what post-apocalyptic stories are, I suppose, in some ways, and depending on what they focus. But resources are scarce. Max has got his sawn-off shotgun, but as we see throughout the film, shells aren't exactly easy to come by. It's kind of a big deal when he has one.
Yeah, I really appreciated that in this movie. Is obviously with the last Mad Max, he was a cop and he had access to ammo seemingly just by virtue of being a cop. But I like how this movie, when they kind of ditched the cop aspect, he's kind of just out on his own, that it shows how much he's hurting just in every sort of resource. Like, we see him eat one meal in this movie, and it is straight up dog food.
It's a kind of dog food. Actually, minor correction, I think you see him eat dog food twice in this movie. The second time's a lot quicker, but you do see it.
Fair enough, but regardless, both of them being dog food.
Both of them are being dog food, yes.
Proves the point there where it's like he's going to take whatever he can get his hands on, however small it may be, because it's necessary to survive out here.
Yeah, and his dog's got a bit of a look in his face when he's chowing down in that dog food. He's
God.
like...
All right, I'm going to stop right here because I know you're not a dog person, but this is like one of the best movie dogs I have seen in so long. I love this
I'm
dog
not anti-dog. I like dogs.
I have heard you on numerous occasions saying, like, look, if it's between a cat and a dog, I'm going to shoot the dog like 4 times for no reason.
I prefer cats, yes, but I'm not anti-dog.
All right.
Especially a proper dog like this. It's the little noisy dogs I don't like. The little ones that are only ankle high and just bark.
Little chihuahuas and whatnot.
Chihuahuas, little terriers, like all these little... Like, no, you give me a German Shepherd or a Labrador or whatever. Like, that's a proper dog.
All right. Fair enough.
Anyway.
I just feel like I remember you tearing down dogs on numerous reviews sometimes.
Sometimes I might play into it to annoy the other person. I don't think I actually have a deep-seated anti-dog stance here. Come on.
Fair enough.
It's a good... I agree, it's a good movie dog. But the dog's got a look on his face. Is like, hey, dude, read the label. That's mine. That's just... I don't know. I thought that was good.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, without further ado, we'll get into our feelings on the movie, and we'll take it from there. David, what did you think of Mad Max 2, The Road Warrior?
I mean, it's better in every way. I mean, I think that's the least controversial statement I've ever said on this show in the few episodes we've had. This is everything that I think this is what George Miller wanted to do with the first Mad Max movie, but again, he didn't have the budget. That was always the thing, is that it felt like there wasn't enough money in the first Mad Max movie to really do what he wanted to do. This movie, apparently it had like 10 times the budget of the original, and he just went for it. And I think that this is super fun action. It's immediately engaging. It keeps you the whole way through. It's very tightly written. I enjoyed this significantly more than the first one.
Yeah, I think it's a mix of the money being there, and also even just the concepts, like being able to do one movie and then seeing what worked and what didn't work, and then saying, okay, here's where I can take this further, and then we get this, right. We get this, like the movie that defined what the post-apocalyptic wasteland is, which is probably why it didn't feel weird at the time when they made the first one, because they weren't trying to do that. He was just making this new world that he hadn't really hadn't been done before. And then this movie is so ingrained in pop culture and so ingrained in what it kind of created. The Fallout games take from this. In the 80s, there's a ton of Italian rip-offs of the Road Warrior. Not Mad Max, the Road Warrior specifically. They're ripping off that. There's a wrestling tag team from the late 80s called Demolition who straight up take the main bad guy's outfit from this, pretty much. Aside from the hockey mask, I suppose. They have their own fancy masks. But, there's a lot of that going on where it's just so ingrained into the zeitgeist. Almost to the point where it's surprising when you go and watch it now. I think on my first viewing, I was surprised at just how simple it was in terms of the story. And that's not a critique. I actually love just how simple it is and how much it is just about trying to solve one problem. The whole movie is about trying to solve one problem, and it's like, who can help with that? Will Max help? Does he want to? Is he motivated to? And just getting to that point where we build up to a third act where the final 20 minutes is just this phenomenal chase sequence, which, for the record, knowing what's to come, George Miller clearly one day wanted to do that last 20 minutes for the entire movie. And if you're looking forward to Fury Road, then that should give you an idea of what you're in for, pretty much. So, Road Warrior's great. It immediately feels more cinematic right from the get-go. Max being this silent protagonist, not entirely, he does say some lines, but he spends a lot of the movie just taking things in, and you're watching him figure things out and make decisions without ever uttering a word.
I can't remember what the count is for Hannibal Lecter on minutes of screen time. Max definitely has more minutes of screen time, but I think he only has 16 lines throughout the whole movie.
Oh yeah, I mean, Hannibal Lecter outright monologues when he's on screen, so he definitely racks up the words, even though he's maybe not in as many scenes as Max is.
True.
He's a talky fellow, that Hannibal. Loves to,
So I guess he's just the counter to Hannibal Lecter.
Yes.
On one end, you have Hannibal Lecter. He talks a lot, but he's barely in the movie. Meanwhile, Max here has barely uttered a word, but he's always around.
Hey, there's definitely going to be cannibals to fight in the Wasteland. There's no way that's not a thing. Right? We don't see them in the movie, but I've no doubt that they exist. One thing actually I said in the last movie, because I didn't remember this one well enough when we were talking about the last one, and I said, I bet he's not got his Australian accent for the second one. And to be fair, he still does have the Australian accent, and a lot of the supporting characters are still clearly Australian. There's even a dead kangaroo in the road, early on in the movie, so this is definitely still Australia.
I was actually kind of surprised with how much it was, because obviously he had a big budget, but not enough to change the entire look of the Australian outback. But it did just strike me as, no, they just went to the outback. This isn't a set. This is just the outback, and then they built this little mining community in there.
I actually don't know. I know there's a 50-minute documentary on the iTunes version that I could watch. Maybe there'll be answers in there of how much of it did they build, how much did they find, kind of thing.
Well, that's the thing, is the only thing they could have built, really, because it is so bare bones and what it is just that little mining community.
Oh, sure,
town.
Because
everything else is just dirt.
Yeah, well, in terms of location, but I mean, obviously there's a lot of costumes and vehicles they had to make.
I didn't expect them to go out into the desert and find BDSM gear just laying around.
I don't know. Australia's a cookie place.
That's why we sent all the criminals there back in the 1800s. They're just a bit too kinky.
Yeah, so no, I think the idea of the reluctant hero stuff is there. There's a kid in the community that needs help, who obviously takes a liking to Max. That's a part of the plot, and that's part of the kind of the emotional connection you might feel as you're watching. Yeah, it's you know what, Max, maybe you should help them go on. This kid clearly wants to stick around you. He's clearly impressed by your gravitas as a badass.
Yeah. And it's amazing how fast he wins the kid over too. There's this entire community that you theorize have been helped with this kid, helping him grow, all that. But I guess no one has quite fallen into that strong father figure role that the kid needs. And as soon as Max shows up, he's like, "You're it. You're my dad now. Hope you're happy with that."
And it kind of makes sense that Max would be reluctant to even fulfill that role because he lost a child. You know?
Yeah,
like, he would probably have very mixed feelings about acting as a father figure to anyone because he lost his only child.
Well, I think it's also, throughout this whole thing, it seems that the community of this mining town does pretty much act like a family. I think one character at one point even says, like, no, this is my family. These are the people I care about. So with Max having lost his whole family, it's very clear that he doesn't want to build those attachments again because they are so strenuous here in the wasteland. They are so easily killed by basically anything at any given point.
Yeah, on the characters, there's not so much to say here in terms of casting. It's mostly unknowns, but there is one name that I kind of recognize, and I didn't recognize the face because he looks significantly different, even though the movie that I know him from is only a couple of years after this. But so there's like, I would say there's two main villains that we really focus on. We have the Humongous, who's the guy in the demolition gear, and when I say demolition, I mean the tag team from wrestling, not a demolition crew, just to be specific there.
For anybody who doesn't know wrestling, think hockey mask and then like He-Man from the 80s.
Yeah, sure, yeah, that's a fair, right? And he's the leader of the bad guys. And then his main henchman, his main wild dog, who's got a red mohawk, is a character called Wes, played by Vernon Wells. Now, I recognize the name Vernon Wells. And here, he's got no facial hair and he's got a red mohawk, so he looks very distinct and probably doesn't look like that most of the time. And sure enough, this is actually the bad guy from Commando, but in Commando, he looks like Freddie Mercury.
All right, interesting.
Well, I'm not saying he'd mistake him for, but he's got like a Freddie Mercury haircut and mustache, is what I'm saying.
Gotcha.
Right, I'm not saying you'd mistake him for Freddie Mercury, but he's got that kind of look to him. So I was like, oh wow, that's him, and I'm like, okay, I remember him having an Australian accent, and that's fair. Yeah, that lines up. So just one of the only real connection that I'd noticed with anything else that I'd seen, other obviously than Mel Gibson, who's had a very prolific career. So other characters worth mentioning, there's the leader of the town, there's a couple of ladies there that aren't really big characters. There's one that's kind of the tough warrior type, and then there's one who's kind of the damsel that someone wants to save. And then the other prominent character would be, he's referred to as the Gyro Captain, but he's kind of this kind of comic relief character almost, who is an unlikely ally as the movie goes on. He kind of starts out as someone who, Max doesn't like very much, but over the course, like, maybe becomes useful and grows a spine, because he's a bit of a coward early on. Yeah,
he's definitely like the quirky character. He's got a lot of weird things going on about him, but essentially he sees Max's strength and then immediately lashes onto that, be like, oh, me and you, we're going to be a team, right? That's how this is going to play out. And Max just keeps telling him, like, get out of here. I don't want anything to do with you.
Yeah, Bruce Spence, who plays this character, has apparently been in a Lord of the Rings movie. He's been in a Star Wars prequel. He was in Dark City. So he's popped up in things. I don't recognize him from these things, but
from what I remember of at least the Lord of the Rings role, he does a lot of like heavy prosthetic roles.
Yeah, so you wouldn't really see him in the movie per se.
Yep.
Okay, that's interesting. Now I'm just browsing his filmography because he seemed like someone who probably had a career just based on his level of charisma, if that made sense.
He has tons of roles. He's got like 130 roles on IMDb, but again, it's one of those ones where either he's in heavy prosthetics or it's such a minor role that you probably wouldn't have recognized him because he's not exactly an attractive actor, especially. I'm not sure if he had like prosthetics or fake teeth put in, but
they're definitely fake teeth. That's not his real teeth. Come on.
I mean, I hope so, but like the reason that I recognized him is because the prosthetics role that he had in Lord of the Rings, he also has really messed up teeth. And I was like, is that just his thing? Does he just have really messed up teeth in all of his roles? But I mean, yeah, I would assume that at a certain point there, even if they were messed up back in the early 80s, he could hopefully get them fixed and become a standard, like, Hollywood smile sort of thing.
Yeah. Good job vamping till I got back.
Man, that was tough.
Look, Firefly sometimes will just stare at me and I need to wait like 10 seconds for the little shit to respond. All right, so yeah, I mean, I think that's about. I don't know how much more we can say without going into the spoilers. I'll say the music also felt a lot more immediately. I guess cinematic against the word I'll use, because it looked more cinematic, but it also sounded more cinematic.
Right.
Brian May did the music, who's from a famous band, I think.
Oh, yeah, Queen. Yeah.
Yeah. I couldn't remember which one. I was like, which one's he from? But yeah, Queen. There you go.
He's from Queen.
Another Freddie Mercury connection.
It's all just back to Freddie in the end. The only other person that I wanted to bring up, it's not a big role. It's actually a very small one. Max Fairchild. He played Broken Victim, which again, I'm not even sure which one there is. There's a bunch of victims in this movie.
Yeah. Okay.
But it is noted that this is one of those first times that I know keeps popping up in the Mad Max franchise, which is recasting actors, but in totally different roles.
Oh,
because
sure.
he was also in the first Mad Max movie as well.
Yeah, I think Bruce Spence is in the next one, just because I saw Thunderdome as I was browsing his list there. But I don't think he's playing the Gyro Captain in 3.
And then the guy who plays the Humongous is also in Fury Road as a main character. So,
well, we never saw his face, so I mean,
no, yeah, but
fair play.
I think they're different characters based off of.
I agree. I'm saying that's how you get away with it, because we never saw his face. So
yeah, for sure.
Could have been anyone under there. That could have been a young Tom Cruise for all we knew.
That is one ripped young Tom Cruise.
He bulked up for a role where no one could see his face, and they kept it a secret and gave him a pseudonym. And then he got back slim again for his next movie. With
to be fair, it would be just as homoerotic as I think of young Tom Cruise. So.
Yeah. Also, the movie does have it's not a lot, but there's a few specific moments of good gore or violence where it'll do something. It's like, oh hey, that looked quite good, and there was like it's not pulling its punches there. It definitely feels like a savage wasteland. So yeah, lots of things. So we'll get into the movie, I think. So spoilers for Mad Max 2: The Road Warrior. You have been warned.
Or The Road Warrior Mad Max 2, since apparently there's such a massive difference.
They're the same thing. Calm down. Calm down, David. Okay, so the movie, what's interesting is the movie, so it starts with this little flashback thing, and it uses like news footage almost to try and show the apocalypse happening, and there's this narrator. And at the end of the movie, of course, the narrator turns out to be the kid grown up.
Yes.
Talking about the past. And I think one of the interesting things about this is that this is in 4:3, which is fine. That's like a TV ratio. That's what they're going for. But what caught me off guard about it is that even the Warner Brothers logo starts off in 4:3, and it goes into it, and I was like, I've got the 4K version, and it's clearly got the bars at the top and the bottom as if it's going to go to the anamorphic widescreen at some point. But I couldn't remember it starting off in this sort of 4:3. But sure enough, it's when it eventually cuts to Max in his car after the flashbacky stuff, where it just jumps to, here you go, here's the big cinema scope visuals, right? But up until that point, even though you see Max in this sort of 4:3, and like a sort of, I think it's before the news footage starts, you get like this sort of tracking shot of him standing there like this sort of like hero in the road.
Yeah.
He's like, the warrior of the wasteland, Max.
It's such a cheap trick, but I always get a little bit like goosebumpy whenever there is like that format change.
Oh yeah.
Because it is just, and also, I didn't notice this because of the way my speakers are set up, but apparently the opening sequence is in mono, and then as soon as it kicks over, it goes over to stereo as well.
I mean, I've got a 5.1, and I wouldn't say I noticed it shifting from mono to everything else, but I will say it felt like it got much louder when the engine revved.
Right.
When it because it cuts to him and then the engine revs, and it feels like the room fills with sound. So it probably was switching from mono to 5.1, but it just... it's like sometimes a scene just doesn't have surround sound, so it doesn't really make much of a difference.
For sure, but like it's those little cheap tricks that show a more basic understanding of the medium rather than just, I think this is going to look cool. It's more so of like, no, this is going to look cool and it's going to work in a way that only film can work.
Yeah, because it's not only are we doing the TV ratio so it looks like news, and a lot of the footage is this sort of stock footage of explosions and you know, government like meetings and things like that, parliament, whatever it is. And it doesn't give you that much detail in what it says there was two sides in a war, right? And from the sounds of it, that war happened before Mad Max 1. It sounds like Mad Max 1 happened in the gradual collapse that came after. No?
Well, that's the bit that I actually found interesting, because the opening narration, you don't know who is the person narrating, because obviously it's not Max. They're referring to Max in the third person. So you don't know who it is. With the reveal that it is the feral kid, I actually think that the war that they're talking about did happen during like Max's lifetime and stuff like that. But then it just wasn't passed down. Like all of the details were kind of just lost by the time this kid
you're saying
got to his age.
He's unreliable, and not because he's an unreliable person, but because the information, once you're a generation or two into the post-apocalypse, is all quite sketchy, because there's no easy way to keep records. There's no central information to access.
Yeah, it would all just be an oral history being passed down, and I'm sure that nobody's going to remember, like, it was between Exxon and BP. Those were the companies you need to remember.
I mean, I think the implication I got was still two countries fighting. I mean, I get the joke you're making, but
they say two tribes specifically, so could be anything.
Yes. So I mean, and obviously that makes sense given the world that he grew up in. He would refer to them as tribes as opposed to governments or whatever.
And then the only other thing that also threw me down that line is that at one point, the gyro captain is talking like, "Oh, you know what I miss about the old days? Like clean women. Like nice perfumed ladies," which makes me think like he remembers the old days. He was around for them. That was a time he was there for.
Yeah, I think Max was. Well, I mean, that would still track with what I said, though. The war happened before the first movie, and that the first movie's just on this kind of, because it mentions in the narration that the gangs started to rise up as civilization was like losing its foothold. And that's kind of where we were in the first movies. Like the gangs of the Wasteland are kind of, and it made me wonder in this one as well, as if is there maybe still civilization somewhere, and it's all these small towns in the outback and like the smaller places that are all crumbling, but maybe there is a centralized city somewhere that is still functioning and that still has a police force and so on.
Yeah, like I'd have to imagine out here in the outback, it is just essentially the Western. But if you made assuming this is supposed to be Australia, because I don't see any reason why it wouldn't be. You made your way into like Sydney. I can't imagine that there's roving bike gangs through the heart of the city of Sydney.
Yeah. And if there
seems like it would still keep up a little bit.
And if there is, then I imagine it happened in the cities potentially last, because that's where, everyone would have congregated there for protection. The system would have tried to like bulk up around the cities. But all the little villages and towns that are sprinkled across the countryside and all that would all be the ones that are left to the gangs and whatnot.
And that's honestly what I think the first Mad Max movie was maybe he wasn't in like a Sydney level city, but he was in a civilization area. That's why we saw so many of those little like outcropping towns where it still seemed like, they at least had like heavily paved roads and intersections and stuff like that, rather than just one long stretch that the outback has.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think there's a decent job of like connecting to the first movie. It brings up the death of his family, and that kind of just is like, okay, this is how he became who he is.
Right. That's the part I feel like was kind of retconny. I think the other stuff worked out well enough, but like the only things that they say is like, and his family died, and now he's angry. I'm like, there's a lot more to that, guys.
I mean, we don't have to. How much do you want them? Like, they're not 5 minutes explaining the ins and outs of that.
It makes sense from a narrative point of view of like, this is just all we know about essentially this folk hero, this guy that just shows up, he fixes things, and then he disappears. It makes sense narratively. But I also feel like this was put in as a, hey, Americans, we know you didn't watch the first one, so here's everything you need to know. And that's where it's like way stripped back to just the bare essentials. And then also throwing in extra things of like, don't question why there were so many totally functional cars in the first movie if gasoline was so like rare at that time.
Yeah, I mean, it was again, it was sort of like this gradual heading in that direction. Yeah. So I think there's a little bit of wiggle room. I do actually think ultimately it was a nice choice to make it work as a standalone movie, especially since there's nothing in the movie's story that requires it to be like required viewing for the first one, right? So I feel like them saying, okay, let's do this little intro just so that everyone can feel that they're on board with who the character is, because that's literally all you need for this movie, is to just have an understanding of, okay, he's this lost guy who's got nothing to live for anymore. He's got a dog now, and that seems to be, his one companion, but other than that, he's completely on his own. And it's, at the same time, though, I think that if you cut that opening out, if you just started with him like on the road and just kick the movie off. I don't actually think anyone would be that lost. I think it would still work as a standalone movie. It's just a little bit of context for who he is, just so that you feel like you know him better going into it. But
yeah, I mean, if you cut out the intro, it would just basically be any other like Western. It would be like the Fistful of Dollars sort of thing, where it's just a stranger rides into town, and then we get the motivations of all the characters as the movie progresses.
Yeah, and I do love the opening because it's all just about Max looking for fuel. He's almost out. He's in a chase with some of the guys, including Wes, the Mohawk, from Commando. Yeah. But yeah, Wes from this point on, and he is very upset at Max. But Max ends up winning the race and crashing one of their cars. But he finds a truck, like a big truck, big semi truck that's sitting there, and we see just how desperate he is for gasoline, because he like it's dribbling out the tank, so he puts down like a plate and some buckets, whatever's just around, just little things that can catch it.
Yeah.
To the point where he even like gets a bit of like a handkerchief and like try and soaks what's fallen in the ground already, and then rings it into his thing. And I'm like, oh, you're desperate for every last drop. That's how desperate you are for this.
I think that was like an incredibly smart choice, because yes, it's one thing to have the buckets and stuff, and it's like, okay, he's just catching the can, but as soon as he tries to sop it up with the handkerchief, it's like, oh no, like that's what sells it for. If he runs out of gas out here in the outback, it's death. There is nothing that's going to be able to save him from that point on.
Yeah. And from here, he moves on, right? Wes isn't happy that they kind of lost, but he's like called back to his raiders, right?
Yeah.
Max moves on, and he finds a gyro, which I'm glad they mentioned what this is called later, because for the first little bit I was just thinking of it as a naked helicopter.
I was calling it a whirlybird.
I think I've heard gyro before, and I was like, okay, that sounds familiar now that I've said it, but I mean, it is just a seat with the propeller, basically.
Yeah, I think it's actually called like a gyrocopter.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Is the full term.
But naked helicopter, I think, sounds catchy. But there's a snake there, and it's this guy, the gyro captain, like pops out and like holds him and says, "Hey, like you're going to give me everything you've got." And
I'm sorry, I just really want to say, when you say he pops out
of the ground, yes, he pops out of the ground, yeah.
He literally just emerges. He's completely covered in sand, and then he just sits up like a zombie with like a crossbow trained at Max's face.
And Max has got his tank rigged so that if anyone tries to empty it, it'll explode. Right? And the guy's like kind of prepared for that. He's like, "Oh, no, you're quite smart. You've probably got this rigged." So that's which tells you that he's not the first person to do that in this universe either.
Oh, yeah.
That's as cool as something people do, because it's, again, their most valuable thing other than the car itself. So. But of course, Max does one-up him with his shotgun. Although, of course, we find out later that he actually has no shells for it. Because when he does find 2 shells later in the movie, one of them just crumbles in his hand, and then the other one doesn't. And he's like, "Oh, great!" And he opens his shotgun, puts it in, and the other guy's like, "Wait, the whole time you had no shells?"
Tricky.
Yeah. I think he says that's dishonest. I think that's what he says.
Oh, yeah, that's what it is. Also, during that scene when he's disarming the booby traps on the tank, he also has a knife holstered right next to the thing, as if, like, not only do I know that I'm going to get robbed of my gas, therefore I have to booby trap it, but I also know that people know that I'll booby trap it, so when they tell me to disarm it, I can then stab them.
Yeah, so he handcuffs this guy up, chains him up, and because he's going to, well, we don't know for sure if he's going to kill him, but the gyro captain thinks that he's going to kill him, so he's like, hey, like don't hurt me. I know where you can get gas. I know where there's a lot of gas, like a lot of it. And he's like, "All right, keep talking then." And so he chains him up, and he leads them to this high point where they look down, and this is where we get the main community that we're going to be dealing with the movie. And it's like a circular camp built around like one oil pump. And they've got a big tanker, the type that would attach to a semi-truck, which is important because that'll come up later, that he found one already. And clearly this is the holy grail in this wasteland, is having a semi-truck tanker full of fuel that they can use. And apparently the gyro captain's been keeping an eye on this place, and the raiders, led by Humongous, and Wes is like the second in command, they have been trying to get into this place, but this group here who are all dressed in white, which there's no reason for them to be all dressed in white. It's just a nice visual thing for the movie, so you always know what the good guys are and who the bad guys are.
I was gonna say this is a very color-coded movie the whole way through.
Yeah,
except for Max.
But we know who Max is, so we never question that. But they're all wearing like a white like football pads, like American football. Well, does Australian football use these pads as well? I guess it makes sense.
I believe that would be rugby, but yes.
No. There's rugby, but there's also Australian rules football.
Oh, is there?
There's a second thing.
As a Yank, I'm not exactly
I don't really know about it either.
Sports, so... I mean, it wouldn't surprise me. It does strike, but like, it would look the same as normal football pads. So yes, that's the kind of style it's going for. I have to assume they'd be white, because otherwise it'd just be wasting money on dyes.
Yeah, because obviously they just have stuff covering them. So I've just googled Australian rules football to make sure I wasn't crazy. Australian rules football, also called Australian football or Aussie rules, or more simply football or footy. Okay, we get it. There's a lot of things. Is a contact sport played between two teams of 18 players on an oval field. Oval field, interesting. Often a modified cricket ground. It looks like a rugby ball that they're holding, but they're not wearing armor in this photograph. So.
I did type in Australian football pads, and it does look just like normal football pads. So
okay.
I don't know, maybe they look different in the late 70s, 80s, but...
Yeah, maybe they decided we're going to stop being pussies and stop wearing pads, and we're just going to like kill each other on the field.
I mean, you say that, but then I added in 80s, and now I see one that's just covered in spikes, so maybe they went hard the other way.
That's so funny. I'm being facetious for the record. I do not think people should be injuring themselves playing a sport. I don't even like sports.
No.
So,
I was going to say, I don't even think people should be playing sports. It's just,
I mean,
sit down, play a board game.
I'm not going to go that far. I don't really care if other people play sports, but...
No, it's just so I can feel like I can participate. Okay. Because there's no way I'm going to be able to join the Australian Football League with this spike paddling going on here.
I don't know. I think they have like regular. I mean, I say regular, I mean soccer. I'm sure they have that as well. I'm sure they have rugby, soccer, and Australian rules football. I think they have all three in Australia.
Wouldn't surprise me.
Even though they all seem like they're variations on similar things, but whatever.
I mean, if Australian rules football is anything like American football, it's just the most complicated rule set that is entirely separate from the other two.
Well, because at least I understand why America doesn't have rugby, because rugby and American football are, they're similar enough that I see why you wouldn't have both. There's no reason to have both.
Also, America really has to like make its own thing. We can't just take from other places. We're kind of stupid like that.
Oh, to be fair, you don't have the only claim to the most complicated rules because cricket exists. So,
oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Man, that is such an American sport if we had come up with it first.
Yeah. A game lasts like 3 days. Like, what? Yeah, you have to play it in days. You got to just do it in one go.
More advertiser spots.
Apparently. People get really into it, I guess. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, anyway, they're all wearing these pads and whatnot. And in fact, some of them probably are wearing like cricket pads, because Australia plays cricket too. They're into the cricket. So some of the shin pads and stuff, I'm sure, are actually cricket pads. But it's all various sportswear that they're all wearing in this little community.
On the good side. On the other side, it's BDSM gear.
It's S&M gear. And Wes specifically has, I'm going to call him his boyfriend, and I'm not saying that in a negative way, but he has like a sort of skinny guy with blonde hair who is like on the back of his bike with him like throughout the first chunk of the movie. And he's very upset later when he dies. So I was like, and I say that, we do also see Wes rape a woman, so he's clearly also into women, but it does seem like it's at least his best friend, if not more. I
mean, I'm going to quote Humongous here, which is very poor to do because it's not going to fly well, but he does at one point call out like the different factions of his group, and one of the factions is, quote, gay boys. So I think that was just the faction that Wes was a part of.
I didn't catch that, but that's just because it was hard to hear what he was saying into that. Because he's got like a little speaker that he's...
Yeah, I had subtitles on, so I was like, wow, that's a really strange name for a faction of your group that's trying to be menacing.
Yeah. Which I suppose is one of the few clues that maybe this isn't American, because I don't know if in a movie in America in 1981, 82 would have gotten away with that, or would have wanted to do that. So I guess that's just one of those little quirks where you're like, oh, hey, they got to do this because Australia was more open to just having that, I guess.
Not as offended.
But yeah, so yeah, they're all very, I mean, hell, Wes has like chaps on, and he's got like a little fur tail that covers his ass crack, but it doesn't seem like he's wearing much underneath those chaps.
No, so this is actually one of my favorite trivia bits, is that apparently Mel Gibson's nickname for him was Barometer Bum. And that is because it got so cold in the outback when they were filming at night that whenever this guy's ass would turn purple, that was the cue for everyone to go inside and warm up. And that's such a wonderful, just like, imagining of how this shoot actually went.
Yeah. I guess you look at the desert and you just assume warm because you think of warm with desert, but yeah, like obviously it gets cold at night at the very least.
Yeah, and I'm sure they shot like in the off season so that people weren't dying during the day as well.
That would make a lot of sense. Well, if I remember correctly, one of the things with Mad Max Fury Road is that it took a long time to shoot because it took a long time to find the right, times to shoot the movie in the desert they were shooting in, and like sometimes they had to shut down for a while because the storms that would come in would be too severe to so.
Yeah, well, that's actually the other trivia bit here is that they specifically picked this place to build the oil rig because it hadn't rained there for like 4 years, and they're like, what are the odds that it would rain as we're filming? Oops.
I'm going to assume it did.
Yeah, I had to shut down production for a week.
Well. Hey, there were good odds, okay?
Yeah.
There were good odds. I understand the gamble they took, but hey, it is what it is. If nothing else, it's a fun story to tell in the making of documentary after the fact.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Once the movie's made, but in the moment, they're just sitting there like, son of a bitch. We spent $1 million building this oil rig, and now it's going to go to waste.
That's good stuff. So, basically, Max, and this is where he's eating the dog food, and the other guy's chained up, the gyro captain's chained up, and the dog's there. And they're just watching this camp for a day into the next day, just kind of watching for the activity when they come in and go out. One of the details in the set I really like, actually, is that their door to get into the camp, because they've built like a moat effectively around it. There's no water in the moat, it's just a dry moat, but the idea is that you can't just drive into the wall because there's this big crevice. But the door, what they've got is they don't have like a gate, so what they've got is they've got a school bus that they've like bolted big metal sheets to one side of, and that's like their front door. So they just drive the school bus like backwards or forwards to like open or close. And I'm like, okay, that seems pretty tough. And they've got like two guys with flamethrowers up at the top of the gate just to...
Yeah, they got a flamethrower and like a harpoon gun on the other side. I guess it makes sense that I actually do appreciate that in the apocalypse, in the wasteland, however you want to call it, when ammo runs dry, that pretty much everybody has adapted like crossbows and arrow technology as their default now.
Yeah,
it's just so much easier to make.
Something they can potentially make, yeah. And Max has a gun with no ammo for most of the movie. Like the main villain at one point does pull out a gun, but he's clearly, this is like a rare occasion where he'll pull out the gun because it's the occasion calls for it. No one else. It's not like all the henchmen are all running around with machine guns and stuff because it wouldn't make sense. This does make sense. Where
would you get the bullets? They're just you fire off one and then you got to wait 6 months to find the next one.
In fact, in a way, it remains in that sense. It reminds me more of samurai movies than westerns, in the case that some samurai movies will have like one bad guy who's got a gun, and that's part of the threat is that he's the only one with a gun because he's got it from the West or wherever it's came from. And that makes me think of this, where there's a very limited supply of firearms and even more limited supply of ammunition for them. So
yeah, that makes sense. The difference here being, though, is that they give the gun to our hero rather than the bad guys, typically.
Yeah, true. But hey, it's a Chekhov's gun if there ever was one.
That's true. They do a good job of setting it up, specifically showing there's no ammo, and then when we do eventually get introduced to ammo for his shotgun, they play that hard as a plot point.
Absolutely. Very, very good, and it makes every shot feel valuable as well, which is really good. In fact, I love that the one that he finds that he thinks might be okay. He tries to fire it at one point, and just some smoke comes out of the gun, like the chamber, and just maybe a little spark.
Clearly wasn't doing well.
It's like, oh well, okay, guess that's that done. So eventually, some vehicles come out of the camp, and the raiders run them down, and we focus on one particular that's got a man and a woman inside it. And Wes rapes the woman. You know, basically a group of them sort of rip her clothes off. It's very brutal and just sort of tells you how bad these guys are. And they shoot the man with arrows repeatedly. You know, he's pretty worse for the wear as well.
It's none of this is really on screen. I mean, it's all implied, but it's also done with the gyro captain, and Max just looking through binoculars and telescopes. And it's their faces that are selling the whole thing.
You see like a glimpse of like the clothes ripping off, but then you'll look towards the other person, so that you get a lot of that POV looking through the telescope backwards and forwards. So you just get the briefest glimpses, so it's not like overly gratuitous. It's just enough to kind of sell you what's happening. But Max goes down there. The woman's already dead because they've left like one guy behind with the bodies, and this guy's like shot her with a crossbow. But the guy who's sitting up against the vehicle's still alive, right? He's still hanging on. So Max comes down and kills the bad guy and comes over and talks to him. And at this point, he's not down here to be a hero. And I think I really like this because it's the arc of the movie, is that he's just interested in, hey, if I get you back to your camp, can I exchange my service for fuel? Can you give me a full tank of gas if I take you back?
You said it in so many words there, but I think the only words that Mel Gibson says is, I'm just here for your gasoline. And the other guy just manages to construct this entire thing of like, yes, get me back to camp and we'll give you all the gasoline you could ever want.
And he does. He rides back in his car to the camp. The camp obviously aren't like overly excited about opening up to let him in, but they see their guy being carried, so they let him in. And unfortunately for Max, the guy dies before he even has a chance to really tell anyone. And Max keeps saying, we had an agreement, had a contract. And it's, what was his name? Papagallo.
Papaglio?
Papaglio, yeah. He comes over and he's like, well, if you had a contract, it was with him, and it died with him. So, tough.
Such a dick. Like, it's also the timing of it as well, because like everyone's gathered around this guy, everyone's like, oh, breathe, give him some space, get him medical care, and all Max is trying to do is just like, hey, could anyone ask him to say that we had a deal at all? No? And then he dies, and it's like, all right, great, never mind.
And they don't want to deal with him, they just want to kick him out. They take his car. The sort of warrior woman, who's the one that usually mans the flamethrower, she like handcuffs him to a railing, and they kind of forget about him though, because a few minutes later, because like we said before, there was like 3 or 4 vehicles that left from the compound, and we just focused on what happened to one of them. A few minutes later, the raiders all return, and they've got like the people who were driving the other cars in like carts, like strung up on the front of their vehicles on display as like, we've killed them, or they're, or not, maybe not dead yet, but they're, in fact, at one point I think one of them rams a vehicle when they've got like people on the front on display.
Yeah, that's in the final chase scene.
That's the final chase scene, yeah.
Oof.
Yeah. So they come in and they all stop, and Humongous holds up his hand, so they all stop their engines. So it goes very quiet, very suddenly. And he gets out his little speakerphone thing and starts making his demands, and promises that if they all just leave and leave all the fuel behind, they won't harm anyone. And half of the people in the camp are dumb enough to actually think that's a viable option.
Yeah, I love how there's this one woman, and she was super grieving over the death of the guy who was brought back into the camp. And she just immediately goes in on like, but he gave his word. He said we'd be safe. And it's like, yeah, Dan, the dude with claw hands and a hockey mask. Let's trust him.
Oh, dear. So, basically, they're all debating all this, and they want to try and get away, but they have no way of moving the tanker. The leader, Papa, he's like, hey, like, the best solution for us is to go to, like, where we think it'll be better. And their plan is to go to somewhere near the shore, somewhere where they think there's a better way of life. It's not going to be just as much of a wasteland, and that might be true. We never actually find out in the movie if that's true or not. It's just just assume it is.
Well, they do at least say that the kid took over the tribe, and they said they did make it up north and started their tribe up there. So
yeah.
Theoretically, they were successful. It may not have been the same paradise they were looking for, but at least they managed to grow as a community.
Yeah, but they're having this debate. They can't agree on anything, and then Max just whistles in after he's already freed himself from the handcuffs. He's picked the lock, and he just sits there and says, "The other day I saw a vehicle that'll move your tanker. So, you want to get out of here? You talk to me.
Let's make a deal."
So he sits down and says his terms, which are, I want gas, so you give me a lot of gas, I'll go fetch this truck and bring it back.
Yes. So one thing that we skipped over, which I do think is important here, is Feral Kid makes his first real appearance during the
of course, yeah,
Humongous.
We've skipped. Oh yes, the end of the big announcements that Humongous is making is two of the funniest moments of violence in the whole movie.
Yeah,
it's delightful. Feral Kid's got like a tunnel that he crawls through, and he sort of pops his head out like a gopher on the other side. Right, he's out in the desert, and he's got this lethal metal boomerang.
Yes,
also very Australian, might I add. Actually, until I saw his name and this was Feral Kid in the credits at the end, I was actually calling him Boomerang in my head like the entire time.
I could fully see this kid being called like Boomer or something as like a term of endearment.
I could see it. And he doesn't speak, he only grills at people. I think we maybe saw him do that once already by this point. But he throws out his boomerang, and Wes moves out the way, and it stabs his boyfriend in the neck brutally, and it instantly kills him. And he's very pissed off. He's foaming at the mouth. He's screaming. He wants this kid's head, and he throws the boomerang back at him. Right, but this kid's smart enough to duck it. He's not stupid.
Yeah.
And then the guy. So there's a guy who was helping Humongous with his speakerphone. He was his henchman who was handing him things. He runs off, and he tries to actually put his hand out to catch the boomerang. And would you believe it, the boomerang just severs his fingers. I was cackling so hard at this sequence of events.
Oh, yeah.
This kid has just killed one of them and severed the fingers of another. Although, admittedly, it was the own guy's stupidity that did that.
Yeah, I just love it. This fingers get severed. Everyone in the Raiders group starts laughing because I guess nobody likes the toady. And then Feral Kid does a backflip back into his hole and just crawls away. And I'm like, this is such a strangely comedic scene in the middle of you're all about to die.
I think if I'm going to analyze it from a story perspective, I will say that I think it's establishing that the people in the camp care about each other. The people in this Raider group don't care about each other. I mean, yeah, one guy cares about the one other person, but for the most part, it seems like they all think it's hilarious that two of them just got killed. Yeah. They're not oh, my friend just died, or my friend just got his finger severed off. They are cackling with laughter because they're just kind of, I don't want to say they're just all crazy necessarily, but they're certainly
they're all self-interested.
Yes. Yeah.
Because that's the thing is even when the dude who Wes is into dies and Toady gets his finger cut off, Humongous continues on with his all right, that's the deal. You guys have to abandon camp. He doesn't say well, now one of us is dead, therefore the deal has changed. He's like, nah, screw that guy. He was already gone. Yeah,
and he even says, because Wes wants to get in and get his revenge. He's like, no, come now, my dog. You will get your revenge later. For now, we let them ponder this offer. And then we go on to all the stuff with Max offering to go get the truck. Which I love this because it's such a simple. The movie basically boils down into two parts now, which is mission 1, get the truck and get back with the truck. Mission 2, actually do the whole big escape where they're trying to get the truck out with the tanker and everyone's being chased. That's the two parts of this movie now.
Which it is important to note that Max specifically says that his deal is, I get you the truck. After that, you getting it out of here, that's not my problem.
Yeah.
Me getting you the truck is enough for me to get my reward of as much gasoline as I can carry.
And to be fair, they have no objections to that. They don't even question it. It's not until they see him actually make his way back with the truck and see how good he is at maneuvering and dealing with all the bandits and raiders chasing him, that they go, hey, you're the chosen one. You need to drive this for us. You need to be the one who drives the truck. And of course he doesn't want to. But I love how the movie just kind of splits into these two key parts now, because him walking out with like 4 tanks of gasoline, because he has to fuel the truck. That's like number one. The truck needs to be able to move. So he's got this pole and he's got all these tanks, and he's like having to sneak past the raid because he's having to walk to it. He's not got a vehicle to get there. So he's sneaking past the camps of the raiders, and there's a little tense moment. The kids follow them out here because the kids kind of like, you know, in awe of him now because the kids seen him like do some of the stuff that he's done. So he's kind of following along for the ride. And one of the things here is that when he's halfway there or whatever, he stumbles into the gyro captain, who at this point I had genuinely forgotten about because, like, you know, he wasn't that important in the grand scheme of things. But he's sort of walking, and he's like the trunk that he was like handcuffed to. He's just sort of dragging that along the ground because he's sort of got that out, and he's shuffling along. And Max finds him, and he's like, "Hey, that gyrocopter you've got, maybe we could use that." So, and it's here where he finds the shells, and he realizes that, oh, you never actually had any rounds to shoot me with. But he says, "Hey, that one could be a dud too." And he's like, "Well, there's only one way to find out." And he points the gun at his face, and he's like, "Oh yeah, fair enough. Yeah, well."
Strangely enough, I think it might be real now.
Yeah. So he flies him to the truck, and that gets us to there. But this is a lot of fun though, because obviously they're not like that far away. The raiders are seeing this flying gyrocopter. They're seeing this truck starting to move, and they're coming for Max. And we get, you know, raiders. So we get like a mini version of the scene we get later, which is when Max is driving the truck back, and he basically tells the gyro captain, "Hey, you can go now. Here's the keys for the handcuffs. Off you go. Like, you're not my problem anymore." And he gets back to the camp, and that's a pretty fun chase sequence. This is where Humongous like sees them driving, and he pulls out his gun, shoots at the truck. Max tries to fire his gun. All this stuff plays out here, and it's a really fun and compelling sequence. It's well directed, just as George Miller directed the stuff really good in the first movie.
Yep. We also get an introduction here of some of the raiders have NOS. They have nitrous oxide on their cars, which allows them to just do exactly what it does in Fast and Furious, which is you go into turbo mode and you just cap out your speedometer.
Yeah, which, you know, like all of these moving parts, like I can only imagine the headache of like filming all this stuff and,
you know, but it looks great. Like all of these chase scenes are shot. That was the one thing that I said in the first movie that felt like it exceeded its budget, was that George Miller has a wonderful eye on how to shoot these chase scenes to keep them engaging and have the flow of motion always feel right, have it feel like a proper action scene. And with more of a budget, it only makes it better. He's always got a feel for that, and I never felt disoriented in any of these chase scenes with like 15 cars involved in each one.
I think my favorite thing about it, and this goes for later on as well, but the truck's this big behemoth of a vehicle that it's a big target. Like he can't hide in this truck. He can't maneuver the way he could in his car with the V8, right? He is in this big moving target, and it becomes all these villains trying to like hook onto him and shoot at him or whatever it may be. And it feels really dangerous. But obviously he's got like it's almost like a video game where he's got this safety point. If he gets to the town and they can close the gate behind him, there's a level of safety there. And here, he further proves himself, because when he does drive in with the truck, and they close the gate as quickly as they can, but because he's being chased, a couple of the buggies that the bad guys are on do get into the town. And they're outnumbered, they don't really stand a chance, but Wes is one of the people who gets in, and he's like up top yelling for the guys that get in to like take out the people at the gate so they can let everyone else in and, you know, take the place over. And they're able to fight them off. Max even, you know, gets involved in that and fights them off a bit. He goes up to the flamethrower and earns the respect of the warrior woman who's like, "I was wrong about you, Max. I thought you'd disappear and never come back, but you've earned my respect." And this is where Papa and the rest like, "Max, you are the road warrior. You must drive our truck in our big daringest attempt at leaving this place." And he's like, "Nope, my deal's done. Give me my gas. I held up my end. Leave me alone."
Yeah. And then I do actually appreciate that this is the point where Papa really pushes him and basically tries to goad him into like admitting that he cares to some extent, and he starts bringing up all of Max's like past traumas that obviously the movie gave that little like throwaway line to, but I think that this is the only point where if you saw the first movie, you understand just how deeply it really affected Max.
Yeah, and it's worth mentioning here that Papa doesn't know any of this for sure. He's just kind of guessing. He's like, okay, you've probably lost people. That's probably why you're so standoffish. But we've all lost people. We're in the goddamn post-apocalypse here.
He literally says, like, oh, yeah, so you lost people. What makes you so special? And Max just, like, punches him in the face.
Yeah. It's a really good scene. It kind of mirrors in a lot of ways. Again, this is maybe another nice little thing if you have seen the first movie. Is that scene where he's trying to quit and like his boss is just yelling, "No, you're a hero, Max. You're you're one of the few heroes left." And this scene's kind of doing the same thing, but it is more effective. I would say because this guy is kind of asking for help to try and save people. It's more of a direct like you're being offered an actual chance to help save people here, and he says no. And then if that doesn't get you, the real emotional hook is that the kid, the feral kid, he's like sitting in the car. He wants to go with Max. He wants to leave with Max. He doesn't want to stay with everyone else. He wants Max to be his new dad and for him to go on the journey with him. And Max just tells him to get lost. And because they had like before he spoke up earlier when he was still handcuffed, he had like a little wind up like a song thing. It was like there's
a music box.
Yeah. And he gives it to the kid, and the kid sort of smiles, and he's clearly never seen anything like this. He's like, ooh, this is the bit. And it's like a little sweet moment that shows, hey, Max, this is why you can like Max. It's a little sign early on, despite anything else that happens here, he clearly has a heart. And that's like that hint. So it feels extra sad here that he's like, no, get lost, kid. And he literally takes the music box and throws it away so the kid has to go grab it. And then throws the kid's baggage with him and says, no, get lost, kid. I want nothing to do with you.
I think that what it comes down to is that Max, obviously he is not a bad guy. He does want other people to be able to survive and live and stuff like that. But he does put his own personal survival at the top of the list. He's like, no, if it comes down to it, I'm on my own and I can live on my own and I don't want anybody else bringing me down.
I think it's that he's scared of being attached to anyone again. I think the fear of like feeling lost again. I think it goes back to all that stuff that was in the first movie about him being a hero. I think he is still a hero. He's just, I mean, the word reluctant comes up a lot. We've been saying that a few times, but he really is a hero. He's just trying so hard to not accept that he is. And that's what this
because it hurts every time he does it. It's going to hurt him. And
he's worried that he's going to lose again. And, at the end of this movie, he doesn't. He actually succeeds. He wins. But the movie kind of punishes him for making this choice. Like, he immediately gets punished for refusing because he gets his car, he gets the fuel that he was promised, and he leaves on his way. But, of course, the Raiders aren't just going to, like, not follow him. They're just going to ignore him.
They are literally all on the hill opposite of the camp, and they're able to watch everything that comes and goes from this camp.
So they chase him down, and quite quickly they hit him in such a way that the car flips. His car is destroyed. It's totaled. And the car is just dangling there, and then some bad guys come down to find him, and he is like up against a rock, bleeding, clearly struggling to move. Which, by the way, this reminds me as well. I didn't notice this at the start of the movie. It wasn't until he was leaving to go get the truck that someone oiled it, and I noticed that he was wearing this brace on his leg, and I was like, oh, that's a nice touch, because he got shot in the ankle or in the shin.
Oh yeah,
in the first movie.
I noticed it there too, but I didn't put together that it was from the first movie.
Yeah, we never saw him get the brace, but like we got the injury that he's got that for. That was in the first movie, so that's a nice little touch.
Honestly, it probably just didn't heal back right with how much the legs just splintered, and he probably didn't go to a hospital or anything, so he probably needs that just continuously from now on to be able to walk properly.
Yeah, I really like that touch. That's, of course...
Also, tiny touch in this scene, as he is crawling away from the wreckage, trying to make it so... Because obviously there is the booby trap that we mentioned before, and so when his interceptor flips, the people come down and try to siphon out the gas from it, and the whole thing goes kablooey. But the music that plays as he's moving away from his interceptor is actually the exact same theme that plays in the first movie after he gets shot and has to limp back to his interceptor.
Yeah, I was thinking actually that it's interesting getting into the third act of both this and the first movie. He's both pretty badly injured. Like, he doesn't... Like, he's not a badass in the sense that he's untouchable, he goes into the final moments of both movies in a pretty rough shape. It's just that obviously all he has to do now is drive after this, so it's he's not doing flips, he's not doing big stunt stunts or anything like that.
I mean, with any luck, hopefully he's not doing any
Hopefully,
big
yeah.
stunts.
Of course, though, as soon as the dog was there at the start, and he's such a good dog, and there's all these great little bits where the dog's interacting with her, I'm like, this is a movie from the 80s. There's a good chance they're going to kill the dog.
Yeah, I did. I was good. I didn't look it up ahead of time, but it doesn't make it hurt any less, even when I know that it's probably coming, because it's again that same sort of thing that they did before, where they imply it is happening off screen. They have a character take a shot, and then you hear a dog yelp, and it's so much worse.
And for the record,
just showing it.
When we say shot, when we're talking about this movie, we're talking about a crossbow or a bow or something like that. We're not talking about a gun,
unless otherwise stated.
Yeah. So you just hear that. So it's like, oh, the one friend he had really is gone, and.
But again, I feel like that's what perfectly sets it up for the third act, where up until this point, he's fine with just bailing and leaving, and he probably still would be before, but they took away the one thing that he grew an attachment to, and now it's about revenge.
I think that's a motivator, for sure. Going into the third act, that's a motivator. But it's also, I think you can equally say, there's only one place he could go after this. Yeah, there was only one place he could feasibly go. But now he's got a vendetta that he can do. But I think by the end of the movie, though, obviously he still fulfilled his role as hero, regardless of what caused that moment. Worth mentioning as well, obviously the gyro captain's been at the camp ever since the truck went in. The gyro captain's been there.
He found this little blonde girl that he just took an attachment to, and they were about to run away together, and she turns around and just be like, I want to stay with my family. And he takes it on the chin, but then he also decides to stay with them as well. So yeah, he's kind of their own little group hero.
He sticks around with them. Because I was expecting when she said, no, I want to stay with my family, which then, again, further shows that they all care about each other, that he would just bowl anyway. But no, he sticks around. And not only that, he ends up kind of saving the day. He actually comes out and picks up Max after... Because he doesn't crawl all the way back to camp.
Yeah, no, they traveled a good bit in that chase.
The gyro captain sees it from the camp and gets his copter and goes to save him. So he has like this heroic, like, oh, he actually considers Max a friend now. He wants to go save Max and bring him back. So Papa's going to drive the truck, and Max is like barely walking. He's like, no, I'm going to drive it. He's like, dude, you can barely stand. I'm driving that truck.
Don't gotta stand to drive a truck.
So... and at this point in the movie, there's maybe 20 minutes left. Like, it's all ramping up here, going into this final chase. And it is, like, a chase that lasts, like, a good 20 minutes here at the end of the movie, where Max drives the truck out of the camp. All of the others are in different cars and buggies and stuff, and they all drive in a different direction. The idea being that the truck is a target, and that all of the raiders are going to focus on that because they want it. A couple go after the cars, but most of them go for the truck. They want the gas. And
it seems that the biggest problems come when the trucks reconverge with the bus slightly. Like the buggies reconverge with the truck. Every once in a while, you'll see like Papa come back up and he's like, "Hey Max, how's it going?" And then immediately he's in trouble.
Well, yeah, but like the whole point is that, I mean, it's not the entire like all the buses and stuff with most of the camp don't come to the truck. It's only Papa and a few others who are coming to help Max to try and back him up. The one flaw in this plan, though, of course, that I think most people will probably consider is that, wait, do they not care about their fuel that much? Because it feels like they're just using it as a decoy. And
yes, no, I agree. However, I also think that they fully actually trust Max to be able to shake them. I think that they put all of their trust in Max because there's no other way this truck is going to be able to make it out.
Are you forgetting how this ends?
No, I did. I do know that. And I'm saying for people who are watching this for the first time, not knowing
you're saying,
what it
I
ends
see
up
what you're
being,
saying. Okay.
I think that, like, obviously this truck has to make it out. There's no way that it can't for the plot to work as we know it at that point. So I think they honestly just believe in Max that much to shake it.
I see what you're saying. I was relieved when it was revealed that they did something smart. The truck does not have gas in it. It's full of sand, and we see it pouring out at the end after it flips over.
Oh, God. And no one told Max. They're such assholes.
Whereas they've all taken the gas and canisters and barrels onto the onto the buses and stuff. They've just got it along with them all split up. And so there was never any risk of losing their gas on the truck. The truck was just a decoy. But like I said earlier, in the earlier scene, it did feel like the truck was this big target even before it had the gas behind it. So now that it has this big tanker, it's like, okay, this is this big thing. And we see bad guys climbing over the tanker, trying to get to him. There's some fun stuff here where...
We had the warrior woman and like an engineer guy in the camp.
Yeah, there's an engineer guy who... He's not in a wheelchair, but he would be in one, but he's in like a sling instead, where he's just kind of in this kind of... Yeah, the sling. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they build like 2 posts on top of the tanker that are like little battlements where they can sort of like fire the crossbows from as like extra defense for Max when they're battling the bad guys. And they go pretty brutally. Like the injured the engineer guy who can't walk, but obviously he has no feeling in his legs, so at one point his legs start getting caught on fire and he's just trying to put it out and it's not happening, so he's just sort of slowly burning.
Well, even then, he's like trying to pad it out. Warrior Woman sees this. It seems like they kind of have a little romantic thing that was going on in the background, but like it never actually shown on screen. But he's like waving her away. He's like, "No, don't worry about me. I'm cool. I'm cool. You just do your own thing." And he's just patting it down.
Yeah,
failingly.
I think she gets pulled off or pushed off the truck, and I remember this being quite brutal because the dummy or whatever it is, you actually see go under like, the wheels of a vehicle. It looks quite brutal.
So she goes to actually help the engineer. She gets shot in the chest by like 4 arrows simultaneously.
And then falls off, yeah, that's what it was.
But like not falls off, she dangles off the side. The engineer is trying to pull her body back up, and then they both go under.
That's right. And because I remember thinking, oh man, and that... Maybe it's just because of the way they shot it, but it genuinely looked like it was a body and not a mannequin or a dummy that was in this like shot of like going under the wheels. So it looked really good for what it was. It was very brutal. And of course the feral kid has snuck onto the truck, so he's actually in the front with Mel Gibson at this point, and he's like trying to reach for the shotgun shells that are rolling away, and he's like trying to get to them. There's a great jump scare where Wes like pops up in front of the truck. He's obviously been dangling off the front, and he just pops up, and it's like it's like a proper scare. This is quite good. Meanwhile,
they turn all of the audience attention to getting this singular shell that looks like it's about to bounce its way off the hood. And then all of a sudden, this character that you thought died like 5 minutes ago just pops back up in the center frame. And perfect jump scare.
When the others show up to help him, the gyro captain's also in his gyrocopter dropping Molotovs, and that also... It feels like a really elaborate chase sequence because you've got this help showing up to try and like take off some of the bad guys, and it feels like there's like layers to it because you've got someone in the sky, which... I don't think if I hadn't seen this before, I don't think I would have ever predicted there's going to be someone in the air for part of this final set piece, you know?
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense. He does still have access to the copter. It does still have fuel. There's no reason not to provide air support. And it makes it a more interesting fight scene that not only is he dropping Molotovs, he's also dropping like his pet snake on one of the guys to freak him out.
Which does make the guy turn and shoot his bolt gun at one of the other bad guys. So
yeah,
you know, it's effective. It is.
And then I can't remember who took him down, but someone basically shot at the gyrocopter, landed an arrow bolt in it, and he ended up crashing. Yeah,
not dying. He does survive, but he does go down eventually. So yeah, like it's this big thing, and eventually the truck does kind of like go over because the Humongous just rides into the front of it. So the Humongous basically commits suicide by driving into the front of the truck.
I still don't know how he got there though, because for this entire chase scene, he was up behind there like throwing these tridents, and then somehow he's in front, and I must have missed that bit.
He's throwing tridents. That's really funny to me.
He is though. What do you call
it's just really funny. There's a guy in a hockey mask,
full Aquaman,
in a He-Man outfit, throwing tridents at an oil tanker.
Yeah, this is what Australia is on any other Thursday.
Yeah, no, honestly, this entire 20-minute sequence is so well done. It's like you never get lost. There's always context because you've got this anchor point of the truck as the central focus. You've got a few key villains that you recognize on the various vehicles, and then you've got the red shirts who are the ones doing jumping and stunts and getting pulled under things and getting fired at and whatnot. And then when the help comes in, and you've also got the gyrocopter at play, you've got these other things. So at one point, the Papa character is trying to help him. he gets one of the tridents in the back, and that's how he dies, and he kind of raids off at that point.
Well, yeah, he was specifically trying to get the feral child off the truck. He was like, "Hey, come on, we already won. Don't worry about it." And then he gets trident to the back. So,
yeah. So the truck gets flipped over. Max sees that it's just sand pouring out, and yeah, he has this moment where he like sort of holds his hand out and lets it pour into his hand, and he realizes what they've done, that they've pulled a 180, and it's kind of a nice moment though, because you're like, okay, they pulled it off. They got most of their people away, barring a couple of leaders who went out to try and help Max, and the gyro captain takes the kids, and yeah, we get this. The narration comes back in and explains, yeah, the gyro captain even became our leader for a while, and then eventually when I was older, I became a leader, but we never saw Mad Max again. And it ends actually on the same shot of Max standing in the road that was at the start of the movie, but this time it's in widescreen, and it's this sort of, this hero shot of him, because he's still wearing his leather jacket from the first movie, but he's lost a sleeve, so he's only got one sleeve the whole movie.
I really appreciated that, in that apparently Mel Gibson, basically, he had the outfit from last time, and then he just, like 2 days before filming, basically said, look, if I was out in the wasteland, I'd be having to do everything by myself. So not only did he alter his costume by like tearing off the sleeve and messing up his gloves and whatnot, but he also gave himself a haircut just to make it look that extra bit of like horrible, having to be rough. So I think that was a great little bit of character work there.
Yeah, no, I mean, it feels like it's as simple as the plot is. Like, obviously, it all functions really well in terms of the motivations, in terms of the MacGuffins and what the goals are, which makes for really simple, easy to understand action sequences. But it feels like the director, George Miller, and him and his writers, and even what you're saying, Mel Gibson with his ideas, it felt like it was this like real little can-do indie movie, despite the budget being bigger, because it was all like, what, all these ideas that are here, like the look of the bad guys, like that didn't just come up out of nowhere. Someone sat down and said, oh, what can we do? What can we give the bad guys in terms of outfits? What's the design of these dudes? What's the design of the heroes at the camp and like their gear? Like, there was a lot of thought and creativity went into all these details, and it's why a lot of the knockoffs where it's like, oh, we're just copying Mad Max by having some guys in some S&M gear and some buggies in the desert, they always fall flat, because it's like, no, the reason why this all worked it was because it was unique at the time for a start, but it all had like a solid story to function with as well.
Yeah. Also, one bit that we skipped over, that was probably the biggest thing they did in the movie, was as the group was leaving their little camp, their base, the other people, the bandits, some of them drove in to basically take control. They're like, hey, they abandoned it, we win. And then the whole thing explodes in a truly just massive fireball that you just know George Miller spent $1 million getting to look like that.
The budget's 10 times as big, but like 2/10 of it were this explosion.
Yep, exactly. Also, one other thing I just want to correct, and I know it's a bit late now. Brian May is a member of Queen, but this is a different Brian May that did the composing.
Fair enough. I just assumed it was the dude from Queen. Fair enough.
Yep, different one.
It's not that unique a name, to be fair, but
no, I think it was a safe assumption of saying the guy who does some heavy guitar work is the guy who's the guitarist in Queen, but
hey, other musicians have went on to score movies. Trent Reznor, Marlon Manson even scored a movie or two. So it happens, but yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. How many people have already commented corrections before they got to the...
That's what we do, though. We say purposely wrong things in the first half and then correct them in the second half. Get all the comments from them. Perfect.
Oh, I suppose, yes. Gaming the system, I suppose. That's fair enough.
I fully agree with everything you were saying there in terms of it's such a tightly paced movie as well, because as simple of a story as it is, it doesn't feel like anything is like wasteful. Even the character development, it still feels like it functions to move the plot forward every time that they do it, because like even the bit where Max is giving the music box to the kid, that is nothing but character development. That's not only how the kid works and Max, but it allows us to then later on in the movie believe why this kid is so attached to Max. So it's all form and function blended together.
Yeah, and even just like some of the characters in the town aren't that deep necessarily. They're not that layered, but they do simple little things that just give a little bit of extra meaning later on. For example, Gyro Captain's into this blonde that he wants to run away with him. He's making smiles at.
Mhm.
She obviously says, no, I don't want to do that, but he chooses to stick around. That decision in and of itself is a bit of character development, but the moment I'm getting to here is that just before they're doing their big plan at the end, and she's like on the bus, and he's off to go do his gyrocopter stuff, he looks over at her, and she kind of smiles at him like, okay, good luck, I hope we'll both make it. And it had a little bit of meaning, because, okay, they've interacted a few times, we know that he likes her, she seems to also kind of like him, and...
Yeah.
It added just a little, okay, so there's someone here he cares about, so he's not just doing this for himself. And admittedly, by this point, he's also went out to save Max when he didn't have to. And it feels like at the end, when he's going to help Max, he's doing it because he wants to help Max, not because it benefits him in any way necessarily to help Max. He's doing it because he wants to help him. So that's some character development.
Because it's also, like you said, when he says at the end that he wants to drive the truck, Papa basically says, like, tough. That deal has expired. We are not going to let you drive this truck. But then, I mean, on my initial viewing, when I saw the gyro captain pick him up, I thought it was at, like, the behest of the camp.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Of, like,
no.
oh, go get him. But no, it turns out, like, no, he was just being a friend. He was being a good guy to Max. He's like, we see the smoke billowing up from the explosion of your car, and we're coming to help you, because that's what this community does.
And it's one of those moments as well that I don't think the gyro captain, if you'd asked him before, would know for sure that he would make that choice. I think it's the sort of thing where he's presented with that choice and he has to go do it. Like, he just knows it in the moment. He has to go save him.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think that makes that sort of moment sing. And in terms of the deal as well, when Max says, no, I'm going to drive the truck, Papa's like, no, that deal, there's no deal now. Like, that offer's off the table.
You're not going to get any gasoline for that.
Yeah.
We're not offering that.
And Max is like, I don't care about a deal. I'm driving the truck. And it's like, I'm not doing it for a payment, which again is also some character development. It's a change, because up until this point in the movie, Max was always just doing things as part of a deal to gain a resource of some kind. It was all like, he's not a villain, but he's not doing things out of the goodness of his heart. Other than giving the kid a present, which is just that little glimpse that lets you know that by the end he's going to be doing something because it's the right thing to do, and not because...
Right.
Yeah, so it, like, just simple things make it really good. But ultimately, yeah, the star of the show are the action sequences, it's the stunts, it's all of this being shot practically on locations. And I know Fury Road, even in 2015, part of the reason why that was so well received is because it was also, as much as humanly possible, stunts on real vehicles. It was practical stuff. There's obviously still some CG. There's like a giant storm that comes in at one point, which, yeah, obviously they did that with CG, but the bulk of it is actually as practical as it can be, and that's partly what made it feel so special to watch. And this has a lot of that as well, and it just kind of feels like in the time between this and Fury Road, it's like, okay, here's where the expectations of action have risen, here's the sort of budget we can get now, and we can go even further with it than we did in 1982. But this still holds up, and this still works really well as the pinnacle of the Wasteland movie. Of, you've got the lone wanderer, you've got a lot of bad people, and you've got people who need help. And yeah. So
I think that it is, obviously, the movies that we think of as the Westerns, they had their time, and you can very clearly see, like, if you look at movies over time, where the sort of Western spike was in the 70s era. But I think that it basically kind of just evolved into this. It evolved into the lone wanderer coming into, like, either a modern day setting or, in this case, post-apocalyptic, and just trying to help things. The Western never truly died. It just evolved into a different form like this.
And also that's just a specific type of Western, because the Hollywood Western was earlier than that. That was like the 50s and the 40s or whatever.
I was thinking more spaghetti Western.
The spaghetti Western, which I guess you think of more compared to this, because it's more in the deserty kind of area, because it's more, whereas old school Westerns could be in more kind of Midwesterny type locations. This is more desert, so you think more spaghetti Western. Absolutely. So I guess we're at the point where we're going to rate Mad Max 2, The Road Warrior.
Jeez. Okay. I mean, I don't want to hem and haw this too much, but, like, going into this, I was kind of thinking in the 8 range, 8.5, somewhere around there. But honestly, after talking about it and having gone that, I think I'm going to go all the way up to 9. I think that this is, like, it's such an influential movie, and you can feel it as you're watching it. You can see all the things that it has impacted, not just in, like, post-apocalyptic movies, but just in like culture as a whole, just the way that we even think about what would the like apocalypse look like in a general sense. Mad Max and like leather-bound people on bikes and stuff is just a default that so many people go to, even if they've never even heard of Mad Max. So yeah, I think the importance of this movie can't be overstated in that way, and it is just leagues ahead of Mad Max 1. As much as that movie did a lot of groundwork of setting up this idea as to where we were going to go, this one is the end-all be-all, at least until maybe Fury Road, because I know that had its own cultural zeitgeist, but I haven't seen that yet. So...
Yeah, that kind of hit in its own way and surprised people with just how important it was that year and how much credit it got. So looking forward to covering that. I'm also looking forward to Thunderdome, because I've never seen Thunderdome, and I know it's the sillier one. Okay. I think the studio like forced another director to do some of it or something because they didn't. So I know it's the weirder one, but I am kind of looking forward to Tina Turner and the Thunderdome.
That's fair.
I'm excited to see what that movie is, good or bad. But this movie, I'm going 8.5. I've always kind of, I think before I've maybe been around an 8, and it's kind of bumped up to an 8.5. I think it's a really tightly paced action movie. Set in the post-apocalypse. I think the quiet lone hero who's reluctant and all that stuff works really well. The action set pieces are super fun to watch, and the visuals are very distinct and memorable, which is why it's influenced so much of what we think of when it comes to visuals of the post-apocalypse, because it does a good job of just displaying them in a very cinematic way that you remember these silly gimp suits, you remember Mad Max's look with the one sleeve. Because as much as he had this outfit to an extent in the first movie, the missing sleeve and the other little details are what you think of when you think of Mad Max.
Yeah.
So, 8.5 for me. Really good stuff.
All right. Yeah.
So, there you go.
Also, just one tiny thing I wanted to throw in, because I think this has to be contractually listed in every single review of Mad Max 2, is the one stunt where a stuntman was sent flying over a car ramp.
Oh, and he kind of spins. Yeah.
His feet got trapped, like it hit him on the car, so he did like 2 somersaults before he finally landed. Was in critical condition, but boy, did that stunt look good.
Oh, geez, did he survive?
Yeah, he was alive. He lived, but he was not okay for a while.
It looked good on camera. I mean, no one should get hurt for a movie, but well, damn, it was an impressive looking, because it's in slow motion as well, I think. So you see the spins, and it looks like a hell of a stunt. Okay, very, very good. So next time on the Atomic Cinema Experiment, we'll be looking at a vote winner. So we don't know what the outcome of that is yet, but it's going to be an 80s movie, a cult classic from the 80s. By the time this goes out, we'll already know what that's going to be, but we're recording this before that vote's ended, so we don't know for sure. But that's next week on the Atomic Cinema Experiment. Of course, I mentioned earlier patreon.com and all that stuff, where you can get bonus shows. We have 2 bonus shows. Don't worry, David's going to do his homework after I've done the plugging, all right?
I just sit here twiddling my thumbs for this part.
Yeah, because, yes. I should probably mention the homework at the start every episode, just so people know to wait for it.
I think you did for like the first 2.
Yeah, I've kind of forgot. I forgot to do it. I'll have to start doing that again so people know it's coming.
All right.
But anyway, yes, patreon.com/MailFuzzTV. Me and David specifically do 2 bonus shows monthly that are movie reviews. We do the Criterion Cut, where we review movies from the Criterion Collection, so it's the best of the best, the prestigious. We try and be smart and talk about the
Lord, we try
the medium of cinema and the beauty of art and all that stuff. And then on the other show, Extra Reels, which is a monthly Patreon show at the $5 tier and up, we talk about the shittiest of the shit. We talk about the pain, the misery, the laughably bad on the show Extra Reels.
Just once, I'm waiting for you to accidentally get that backwards. And you're just like, oh yeah, the Criterion Cut, where we talk about the worst movies ever made.
No. So you can get those. There's also a bonus Screams After Midnight and the other shows that are on Mail Fuzz Movies and TV. There's bonus content for a few of them. So by all means, check it out. Helps keep the show alive, helps keeps the lights on, and helps keeps us doing this. So please do. But yeah, David, every episode is doing homework where he goes back and watches a movie, usually that he's not seen, sometimes it's a rewatch, of something that me and Tara did on the Ace before he joined the show, so that he's filling in the blanks, and he will eventually have seen all of those movies too, for, countdown purposes and just general sci-fi awareness and knowledge and all that. So,
Yep.
David, what was your homework movie this week?
Well, I went ahead and I thought, what movie could I do that is a sequel that threw in a kid and also is one of the most critically renowned films of all time? I don't have a joke punchline for this, so I'm just going to say Aliens. I did Aliens.
Okay, I just want to point out here that for the first Mad Max, his homework episode was Alien. For the second Mad Max, he's done Aliens. So if you would like to place your bets on what movie he'll do for his homework when we do Thunderdome, you may do so.
If I can get it on that, I'm all for it, because then I can just game the system based off the odds here. But yeah, no, Aliens. I mean, it's Aliens. I feel like I don't. You did a 2-hour long review with Tara on Aliens, going through like every single scene of that movie. I know. I listened to it.
I'd like to think I made some good points on that review.
You did make some good points. I think that it is a fantastically well done movie. I think that it is the quintessential sequel when it comes down to not only honoring the first movie and doing something that's in the same sort of vein, but also doing its own thing and expanding upon the mythology. I think that Aliens is what every movie franchise, and considering we have a whole show based on franchises, it's what every franchise should look to when it is trying to follow up and do something more with the series. So yeah, it's a great movie. I will say I started to watch the, I guess, original cut, and then I remembered you saying something of whenever I got to Aliens, I had to do the special edition. So I did go back and made sure to watch that one instead. But yeah, it's I had seen it before, but it has been about at least 10 years. So it was essentially all fresh to me. I didn't remember that Hudson, every single line he said was just like quotable as hell.
Oh yeah, because you've heard them all over the internet for the last 20 years.
Like, I knew the big ones. I knew, like, Game Over Man, but, like, everything he said just sounded like I pulled a string on the back of a doll. And
We're on an one-way express elevator to hell.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, full of them.
Add in everything else that, I mean, I can't really say anything that you guys didn't say in your review. It's a fantastic movie. And I will go ahead, I will bend the knee here, and I will give this one a 10.
It is my favorite movie, so I'm delighted to hear that. That's good stuff.
I do think it is worth it. However, I do want to point out, and tiny little thing here is that right before you guys did Aliens, you did The Matrix, to which Tara gave a 10 and you gave a 9.5.
Yes.
And then in this review of Aliens, you justified saying 9.5 is still really good, and it's not something that people should get upset about.
What's your point? What are you saying?
I'm just saying, maybe Alien getting a 9.5 is not the worst thing that I've ever done in my life, Pete.
What? Never seen a hypocrite before? What?
Well, I guess if you're just going to own up to it, yeah, all right, fair enough. I got nothing to counter that one.
I was just having fun last time. Come on now. That's not...
I know. I just feel like it's... Obviously, we film these very far in advance. I feel like it's the sort of thing that the audience is also going to give me some crap for. Of like, you gave it a 9.5.
Oh, sure. No, I love Aliens. I think my perfect version of Aliens actually is in between the two cuts, because I think the stuff with the turrets and I think the stuff with Ripley's daughter, like backstory, is essential and just adds so much to that character. I don't dislike the scenes. I do think I like not seeing the compound with people on it before they go there. Like early on, that's one of the things that's added in the special edition. And I do think going there having never seen it feels better and more mysterious, but I mean, it's a minor thing. So my ideal cut of Aliens would be to keep everything in the special edition except that one part where they actually go out and find the facehugger, because I think that part, we don't need that part, and it adds to the mystery. But it's like, I'm splitting hairs where I'm just sort of like,
Look, if there could be like 7 different cuts of Blade Runner, I think we can make the mild fuzz cut of Aliens.
But hey, yeah, and it's a long chunk, because I remember in the documentaries, like Cameron said, when they were trying to shorten it, because back then they were really concerned about squeezing in extra show times during the day.
Right.
Was that what if we just take out Reel 3, and Reel 3 is both the scene where Ripley's daughter's talked about, and then all the stuff at the base, where they find the face hugger, and we see the people talking about stuff in the center and all that.
Yeah.
So
I was gonna say I did get far enough into the regular cut that it basically went from the thing of like, yes, we've set up this colony and everything's totally fine, and then like the very next scene is, hey, by the way, we lost contact with that colony. And I was like, I feel like we missed something in the middle there.
Obviously there's a time difference because she's got a job and she's like settled into a new life by that point. But yeah, it does feel kind of abrupt in the theatrical cut. Whereas in the, maybe you'd keep the people complaining about communication on the, on the like the command center where there's like two workers talking about what they're doing. But I think seeing them actually find the face hugger and stuff, I'm like, you know what? I don't know if I need that scene, but. Hey, it
kind of felt like on your standard weekly TV show procedural where like before the title card comes up, we just see like, oh, here's how we got into this mess. It didn't feel like it was actually required for the characters.
Yeah, but yes, I'll stop now because we could probably talk for an hour about aliens if I keep going. So yes, Aliens, fantastic, and obviously not only is that an 80s movie for you to check off before we get to an 80s countdown in the middle of the year. We've got a new Alien movie coming out, and we have to do Prometheus and Alien Covenant, so that's another reason why you're going through the Alien movies.
Yeah, my homework is very meticulously planned out for the next, 6 months, so...
So yeah, there you go. That's the show. That's the Atomic Cinema Experiment. We'll see you next time, like I said, for an 80s cult classic, as whatever our Patreons have picked from the options. But thank you very much. Check out Collector's Cut, our other movie show where me and David we're doing 70s disaster movies every week right now, so go check out that. But that is the show, so thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching science fiction and computer at Salsa.